Uh, Hello, good evening, everybody. So we won't make this very long. First of all, we're going to start off with why we were motivated to make what we did over the past day and a half. And so my name is Anshuman. I'm from Delhi. This is Karanveer. He's currently in Pune, as well as Vaibhav, who's in Pune. We had a lot of fun doing this, and I'm going to get started now. So basically, what we thought was, okay, honestly, a show of hands for the number of people who've Googled for symptoms when they've been slightly worried that something might be wrong. Yeah, कितनी बार कैंसर आता है नहीं so exactly so that was what we were coming up with, that a lot of people have these qualms about visiting a real doctor, about actually going ahead and trying to find out if there is something genuinely wrong with them, but don't ever get accurate diagnosis, self diagnosis in fact. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to test and see if this was actually something that was implementable using nothing but your smartphone and all the technology that was just available on your smartphone. No sensors, no extra hullabaloo. So what we did was we actually had many more other plans, but we were only able to implement three. And what we did was, you see these three things, okay. Uh, so I'm going to just talk through it while they sort of fix this. So we have three basic ideas behind what we thought could be achievable. Uh, we first took up a couple of diseases that we thought were pretty commonplace, like say hepatitis, which is jaundice, anemia, basically fever, or you could see, it's something that led to like something like if you wanted to check a particular test that you could actually have at home and didn't really need to visit the doctor for, something like a deafness check. Maybe you've thought you're losing your hearing, and there are lots of other diseases as well. We'll cover in a bit. So what we needed for these, for example, for jaundice, what the doctor usually notices at first is this yellow coloring in your eyes because of the bilirubin leaking into your blood from your liver, excess bilirubin. So there's this very apparent yellowness that happens usually after you sort of, before you even know you've got the disease. And also, the other thing that you would see is an increase in blood in the heart rate of the patient, sorry, a decrease. And so what we did was, the real challenge that we found ourselves actually technically solving was how would we calculate the blood rate without using any sensors. So what we tried to do was, we figured out that if you actually use like your finger or your hand, you can see the blood coursing in as basically it's being pumped in through the arteries, right? And that is essentially the pulse. So what we did was, we used the flash that you see. So in the app here, there are these three options, and you can actually select for your blood rate. What you do is, you basically keep your finger here behind the flash, and you go ahead and you try and see what the blood rate is. It's actually creating a frequency spectrum and trying to find out the threshold after which it sees these changes in pulses. Pulse, yes. Heart rate, yeah. So basically like the BPM, the beats per minute. And this is a very important factor. So right now, this is the change that we noticed over a period of over a minute. And we tried to find what the blood pressure was. Well, this is obviously affected, and it isn't a perfect science right now, but we actually use this we try to find out what the most scientific way and most reasonably accurate way would be, trying to implement this on a smartphone. The other thing that we've done right now is that we haven't really built an app. It's actually a web app, and anybody here can, right now, since it's on the Practo Sandbox Wi-Fi, can connect on it and test it out for themselves. So, yeah, we could actually, if anybody is interested, we can give you the IP address as well as the port address, and you can just log in. Yeah, you can see it on the URL address bar. So basically, what we wanted to do at the end of the day was try and see if this was implementable, and I think we were successful to an extent, because we were also able to get. Acha, right now. Yeah. Uh, this isn't working. Thank you. So basically, what happened is that we also found, like this test we're talking about deafness, right? There's an actual test called the PTA, where you're given these set of tones, or sort of like a signed tone that you're given of a particular frequency, and you get to hear it. And if you can't hear it after a while, the frequency is logged, and basically you again compared to a threshold to see if you're deaf, if you can't hear over that frequency level or that loudness, and or not. And we actually try to, we can actually show you this right now. So now I'll explain the test. So every time you heard this beat, if you could hear it while you were on your headphones, you would say, yes, I can hear it, and it would be recorded. But if you couldn't after a while, like if you heard no sound and you would say, oh, I can't. Uh, and if you were actually above that threshold of deafness, like a normal average person would be able to hear, you would be required to sort of go to a doctor and present yourself. Also, we implemented something really cool that unfortunately isn't completely done on the app right now. Is this the hepatitis or the jaundice metric? We used OpenCV and a lot of other image processing libraries and a couple of trained models. There was actually a research paper called 1000 millisecond face alignment, where they were able to map the face and different features of it, very specific features, onto a template or a trained model. And so what we did was we used that and we extracted the eyes, and then we applied a color mask. We found out online on WebMD and other sites what this ideal yellowish could range from. Like we used a lot of patient data and saw that there was a particular range that it lied between. And given a few very erroneous edge cases, it worked really, really well. But right now it's not working on the app because of a issue with our server. It's running there. Yeah, the server just, yeah, I was out of battery. So sorry. But so this was it. If there are any questions or any, we'd really love to answer them.
So for the deaf, the thing with the hearing, what accuracy levels can you get to, like for a diagnosis, and what kind of diagnosis can come out of? It's only deafness, or is there also a gradient? Because loss of hearing, can it go to a, can the accuracy go to a level where you can even detect loss of hearing, or is it only deaf?
Actually, it's a very standardized test that there is. So what it does is initially you're given a very soft sound, and gradually the amplitude of the sound increases, and you press I can hear it whenever you personally hear it, and that is plotted on the graph for various frequencies. Now this has a very standard cutoff in terms of decibel levels, but it's very hard. You have to configure it first because it varies a lot with the speaker, right? If you compare, if you connect it with the speaker, so the same sound is much louder. So for that, it has to be configured with the particular speaker, but we followed the proper standard. So if we configure it with the speaker, we have the actual decibel level, which is followed by the test.
Like sort of correcting for ambient sound,
Yeah.
because there can be different, the loudness will be relative, right? So for that we corrected for ambient sound. That is why you first hear those beats, so that we can judge whether you can even hear a normal beat or not. So then we set that basis, and then we create the graph on the other, maybe more outliers of those frequency levels that maybe you can't hear. And if you actually cross that threshold, then you can judge it.
I just wanted to say something about the jaundice test. It's not actually deep learning or anything that requires a lot of data. We actually took simple image processing models and discovered the mask, the color. So we do recognize that deep learning is a very important part of medical and will be in the future. And we actually aim to implement implement a X-ray pathology thing, which recently got released by a organization in the USA, and it has achieved a lot of good results. But we're also thinking in that direction, and just wanted to put that out there.
So you mentioned that for the hearing, you mentioned that you do a lot on the, see, on the ambient noise and to make this thing. So you're saying that the entire audiometry that is used by an audiologist to actually find out about this hearing, it can be all done on just software.
uh, we don't think that is possible.
This is the most common test there is. There are other tests where they actually see how the sound is conducted in the inner ear. That obviously we cannot carry out with a normal phone. So this is the one test that we felt could be very easily implemented using a normal devices. As you've probably observed that all the tests we've done so far rely completely on the phone and no external devices. So
And on
So sorry. This what I think, to just completely answer your question, what we'd like to say is that, so it's basically for self-diagnosis. It's not the final call. What we wanted to do was eventually have like a very friendly interface that could actually guide you through this process, right? And then at the end of it, maybe if there is a need for concern, if you actually have some kind of hearing problem that we've identified, or maybe you have jaundice, even if there's a slight chance, to minimize the case of the false negatives, we would like put you in touch with a doctor or tell you to go and see a doctor, and that would give you the confidence. Yes, okay, maybe there is something actually wrong.
On the accuracy on the pulse, which converts into a heart rate, do you have any stat on the accuracy level?
Well, since it's so basically the accuracy, we haven't been able to test it so far, but we used so this has been implemented multiple times, like Sir said as well. So basically, it's a very like a logical thing. The way you would actually check for your pulse when you put your hand here and see if there is blood coursing through your veins. Very similarly, we're actually just counting the transitions in the blood every time there is like a slight blink, or you could say slight dip in the intensity of light.
Like as for the testing that we've done, like the most we could do was probably one hand, one guy takes the actual pulse, the other hand we use this to measure it. So well, it was pretty accurate then, and like it gives you like if you're tense to something, the pulse rate does increase. Yeah, yeah, we actually did that. We ran up and down the stairs and checked. So there was an escalation and everything. So it does the job pretty well. Oh yeah.
So one last thing. So there's another thing that we really found very interesting was Parkinson's disease, and there are a lot of people suffering from it who have no idea that they are or might be in the future. There might be early indicators like a slight loss of motor functions, etc. And for this, we actually found some data, but it was very badly annotated, and it wasn't enough in either size or the quality. So what we wanted to do was, it's basically, there's this test called the Archimedes spiral test, where you have a spiral and you try and sort of draw over it, and if the patient has some evident problem, they will not be able to do that. And for that particular reason, we wanted to actually have a deep learning model that could correlate when you draw, like on a convolutional neural network, and compare if that drawing was actually good enough or not, because we would have edge cases of people actually with Parkinson's who weren't able to draw. But the data wasn't good enough, so this has actually motivated us to go and find better data sources as well. So, or maybe implementations for the future too. Thank you so much. Right.
Thanks a lot, guys.